Good morning, students. Today is our fourth lecture, and in this lecture, we are going to see about the transverse section of stomach. We have already finished about the tooth, vs of tooth, and the vs of tongue. Now, the next part, that is, we are going to see the transverse section of stomach. The stomach is a muscular organ located on the left side of the upper abdomen. The stomach receives food from the esophagus. As food reaches the end of the esophagus, it enters to the stomach through a muscular wall called as lower esophageal sphincter. The stomach secretes acid and enzymes that digest food. Ridges of muscles tissue called rugae line the stomach. The stomach muscles contract periodically, churning food to enhance digestion. The pyloric sphincter is a muscular wall that opens to allow food to pass from stomach to the small intestine. So it is the part between the esophagus and intestine. And the main part of the stomach, as we have seen, is the secretion of enzymes and digest the food. So there are so many different types of layer which are present in the stomach, which we are going to see now. And basically, these layers, there you have to important thing is that you have to remember the names of these layers. So in the transverse section of stomach, there are four parts of the stomach. Basically, we'll see the four parts of the stomach. They are cardiac, fundus, body, and the pylorus. Cardiac is towards the esophagus, and the pylorus is towards the duodenum. Cardiac is the point where the esophagus connects to the stomach, and through this, food passes into the stomach. Located below the diaphragm, the above to the left of the cardiac is the dome-shaped fundus. We are going to see the diagram also, but when you are watching the diagram, you have to see all these parts. First is the cardiac, then dome-shaped fundus. Below the fundus is the body, which is the main part of the stomach, and the funnel-shaped pylorus connects the stomach to the duodenum. Okay, so four parts: cardiac, fundus, body, and the pylorus. The narrower end is called the pyloric canal, which connects to the duodenum. Duodenum is part of small intestine. The smooth muscles pyloric sphincter is located at the point of connection and controls stomach emptying. In the absence of food, stomach deflects inwards and its mucosa and submucosa fall into large fold called raga. Now in this diagram, you can see the upper part which starts from esophagus is the cardiac. Then dome shape, which is the fundus. Slowly when you come down, that part is called as body, and at the end before duodenum, that is the pylorus. So you have you understood four parts: fundus, then next is first is cardiac, then fundus, then body, and then pylorus. Okay, so from duodenum it gets connected to the intestine. So overall, if you'll see the walls of this stomach or intestine or alimentary color are almost same. Only things the changes are the functions. Okay, so we are going to see the different parts of the stomach in detail. Now, if you take the transverse section, you can see these parts in the transverse section. The upper part is this the serosa, muscularis, submucosa, mucosa, and you can see the folds. So first see this diagram. Try to remember the names of the layers. First is the serosa, then muscularis, third is the submucosa, and innermost is the mucosa. The mucosa lies in the innermost layer. It is the innermost layer. Okay. What kind of cells are there? You can see in the serosa, the longitudinal muscle fibers, then circular muscle fibers in muscularis. There are blood vessels, vasculated part in the submucosa, and the convoluted structures in the mucosa. Okay, we are going to see this in the more detail. Okay, so transverse section of stomach, the walls of the small intestine. The walls of the stomach is made up of same four layers as most of the rest of the alimentary canal, but with adaptations to the mucosa and muscularis of the unique function of this organ. In addition to circular and longitudinal smooth muscle layers, the muscularis has an inner oblique smooth muscle layer. Because of this, along with moving food through the canal, the stomach can vigorously churn the food. Churning means barik karna. Okay, churn the food. Mechanically breaking it down into smaller particles. The stomach wall is adapted for its functions. In the epithelium, gastric pits lead to gastric glands that secrete gastric juice. In the epithelium, gastric pits leads to gastric glands that secrete gastric juice. So when you are observing this diagram, you have to hear what exactly I am telling you. The gastric glands contain different types of cells that secrete various types of enzymes, including hydrochloric acid, which activates the protein digestive enzymes pepsin. The stomach mucosa's epithelial lining consists only mucous cells on the surface which secrete protective coat of alkaline mucus. A vast number of gastric pits dot the surface of the epithelium and mark the entry to each gastric gland, which secretes a complex digestive fluid called as gastric juice. Although the walls of the gastric pits are made up of primarily mucous cells, the gastric glands are made up of different types of cells. The glands of the cardiac and pylorus are composed primarily of mucus secreting cells. The glands of the cardiac and pylorus are composed of primarily mucus secreting cells. Okay. The cells that make up the pyloric antrum secrete mucus and a number of hormones, including the stimulatory hormones gastrin. The much larger glands of the fundus and body of the stomach, which is the site of most chemical digestion. Okay, the large glands of the fundus and body of the stomach, which is the site of most chemical digestion, produces most of the gastric secretions. These glands are made up of variety of secretory cells. They are made up of variety of secretory cells. These include parietal cells, chief cells, mucous neck cells, and enteroendocrine cells. Now, this you have to see in the diagram. Parietal cells is located in the middle region of the gastric glands. This parietal cells is located in the middle region of the gastric glands. Parietal cells are among the most highly differentiated of the body's epithelial cells. These relatively large cells produce both hydrochloric acid and intrinsic factor. Okay, HCl is responsible for high acidity, that is pH 1.5 to 3.5 of the stomach contains and is needed for activating pepsin. The acidity also kills much of the bacteria ingested with food and helps to denature proteins. making them more available for enzymatic digestion. Intrinsic factor is a glycoprotein necessary for the absorption of vitamin B12 in the small intestine. Now, the chief cell, which is located primarily in the basal region of gastric glands, which secrete pepsinogen, the inactive proenzyme from pepsin. Hydrochloric acid is necessary for the conversion of pepsinogen to pepsin. Mucous neck cells are present in the upper part of the gastric gland. They secrete thin acidic muscles. They secrete thin acidic mucus that is much different from the mucus secreted by the goblet cells of the surface epithelium. The role of this mucus is not currently known. Okay. So, in enteroendocrine cells found in the gastric glands, which secretes various hormones into the intestinal fluid of the lamina propria. This includes gastrin, which is released mainly in the enteroendocrine G cells. The mucosa of the stomach is exposed to highly corrosive acidity of gastric juice. Gastric enzymes that can digest protein can also digest the stomach itself. The stomach is protected from the self digestion by the mucosal barrier. Stem cells located at point where gastric glands join the gastric pits replaces damaged epithelial mucosal cells completely with every 3 to 6 days. Every 3 to 6 days, these cells are replenished or getting changed. Okay. So in the transverse section, you can see all these parts, which includes serosa, muscularis, submucosa, and mucosa and the associated cells, which we have discussed just now. Okay. Now, how the digestion takes place and what are the different aspects that we are going to see now is the opening at each end of the stomach are guarded by spinneret. Okay, a purse string muscles. These lead into the tubes, that is the esophagus at the top upper end and duodenum at the bottom. Each ball of food or bulbous enters the part of stomach called the fundus and pushes food previously eaten down and out towards the stomach wall. पहिलं आपल्या तोंडामध्ये च्युइंग होतं, त्याच्यामध्ये सलायवा मिक्स केली जाते. सलायवा मिक्स केल्यानंतर फूड कुठे येतं तर आपल्या ॲलिमेंटरी कॅनलमध्ये येतं. त्याच्यामध्ये सुरुवातीला इसोफेगसमध्ये येतं. इसोफेगसमध्ये आल्यानंतर स्टमकमध्ये येतं. ते फूड स्टमकमध्ये आल्यानंतर स्टमकच्या वॉलमधनं वेगवेगळे सिक्रिशन्स, एन्झाईम्सचे सिक्रिशन होतात, हॉर्मोनचे सिक्रिशन होतात. त्यातला पहिला पार्ट आहे कार्डियक. कार्डियक नंतर फंडस, फंडस नंतर बॉडी, बॉडी नंतर पायलॉरस. आणि या प्रत्येकच्या सेक्शनमध्ये आपण जसं ट्रान्सफर सेक्शनमध्ये जे डायग्राम बघितली होती तिथं प्रत्येक ठिकाणी वेगवेगळे मसल्स आणि सेल्स आहेत. ओके, किंवा ग्लँड्स आहेत की ज्या सिक्रिशन करण्यासाठी रिस्पॉन्सिबल असतात आणि त्याच्यामध्ये डायजेशनचा महत्त्वाचा पार्ट स्टमकमध्ये केला जातो. हायड्रोक्लोरिक ॲसिड असेल किंवा इंट्रिन्सिक फॅक्टर असेल त्याचा रोल काय हा आपण यामध्ये बघितला होता की तो एक ॲसिडिक एन्व्हायरमेंट स्टमकमध्ये तयार करतो ज्याच्यामुळं पेप्सिन नावाचा एन्झाईम तयार होतो अँड दॅट पेप्सिन इज रिस्पॉन्सिबल फॉर अगेन डायजेशन. At the same time, intrinsic factor is there, which is also responsible for the digestion. The fundus and the main body of the stomach serves as storage area, holding food until it is time for it to move along the antrum and duodenum. The digestive tract is constructed in layers. The innermost is the composed of mucous membrane that lubricates the tube. Next layer contains the network of blood vessels that nourishes the structure, as well as nerves that activate glands and muscles. In the third layer are the muscularies that move food and certain parts of the system. Soften it and mix it with chemicals. The last layer is the protective covering layer, that is the serosa. Okay, so you must have seen sometimes we swallow air while eating. आपण तोंड उघडून काय करत असतो, चावून खात असतो आणि त्यावेळी आपण बरेचदा हवा आतमध्ये घेतो. ती हवा काय होते, तर ती आपल्या स्टमकमध्ये जाते आणि स्टमकमधनं बेल्च येतो, म्हणजे उचकी येते आपण जर बघितलंस. त्यामुळं जेवताना आपण न बोलता किंवा तोंड न उघडता चावून खाल्लं तर डायजेशन चांगल्या प्रकारे होतं. नाहीतर पोटामध्ये हवा जाते. मागच्या वेळी आपण फर्स्ट इयरला असताना आपण एक टॉपिक शिकलेलो होतो, फ्लॅट्युलन्स किंवा प्रॉब्लेम ऑफ गॅस. तर तो हा कशामुळे होतो, तर बरेचदा आपण जेवताना बोलतो किंवा हवा एंगल्फ करतो, तर त्याच्यामुळं आपल्याला असे वेगवेगळे प्रॉब्लेम्स होऊ शकतात. आपण कसं स्वॅलो करतो किंवा आपल्या पोटामध्ये गेल्यानंतर डायजेशन कसं होतं आणि त्यानंतर ते इंटेस्टाईनमध्ये गेल्यानंतर त्याचा पुढं काय प्रोसेस होते, ॲब्सॉर्प्शन कसं होतं. इट्स अगेन अ इंटरेस्टिंग पार्ट विच वी आर गोइंग टू स्टडी इन आवर नेक्स्ट लेक्चर. ओके, थँक यू.